My background is in nuclear physics and diving deep under the ground to understand how the world works, which was fascinating, but it was a bit boring. So, what I did was I jumped out of that and I got into the world of brands and marketing. So, in a sense, moving from a left brain to a right brain view of the world. And as I've kind of evolved through airlines and working in finance and working in technology, then how do you bring your left and your right brain together has been kind of a recurring theme in my career. Then I became the CEO of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, which kind of gave me a platform in the marketing world. And then 9 years ago, I wrote my first book, which was Marketing Genius. It was all about the left and right brain of doing business today. And 7 books later, and 9 years later, then I'm spending my time traveling around the world, meeting the most amazing companies, the most amazing people, and really, making sense of a changing world and what it is which helps companies to win today. So innovation for me is about making ideas happen. They don't have to be the new ideas. They could come from other places. So quite often it's kind of things which happen in other industries, which you could apply to your own industry, which have already been tested by consumers elsewhere, and you can then make them happen. So creativity is very much about opening up in terms of dreaming new ideas and kind of exploring, but innovation is about then closing down and saying, how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to make it successful in this market? And how am I going to make sure it drives profitability and growth for my company? What I wanted to do was to find 100 companies who are shaking up the world today. And I asked 1,000 CEOs, who do you think is disrupting your market? Who would you love to learn from? And so from that, I found 100 companies in all different sectors, some small and some big, and say, what are they doing to create success, to create value for customers and therefore value for their shareholders in the world today? And making sense of these companies, the shaker-uppers, or as I call them, game changers, and how do they really change the game? They change the market, they play things in a different way. And what is that game and how do you play it is what I wanted to understand. Big data. I guess that's one of the big buzzwords of today, and it is a huge, fascinating challenge. We're moving from a world in 2015 of 4 zettabytes, that's 1 trillion gigabytes, to 40 zettabytes, which is 40 trillion gigabytes of data. And what is this data? Well, it's all that stuff which is flowing around the world in terms of social media, or in terms of tracking each customer, in terms of everything they're doing, or in your supply chain. And it's about kind of taking all of that, amazing data which you have and trying to make sense of it. So big data, the real challenge is to say, well, how can I combine it with big ideas? It comes back to the left and right brain thing again. You can have this huge amount of not intelligence, but if you don't have some imagination, a hypothesis to say, well, what if I was to do this and then to test that against the data, you're not going to be able to move forward. So, when I look at companies who are really using big data, companies like GE, which has transformed their business from a traditional selling big machinery into what they call brilliant machines and more about leasing today. Or Disney investing $1 billion in terms of putting a magic band on every park visitor's hand, and then creating much more individual and immersive experience because they understand that individual. Or Nike, Mark Parker, the CEO, saying, we're not about the shoes or the clothing, we're about helping people to run faster and play soccer better by the technology and the digital information which they now bring together through those fantastic additional products which they now sell. So big data plus big ideas is how you create big impact in the world today. Any change is a human process and it takes time. So mobilizing a culture, engaging people in a different way of thinking is a big, big challenge. And at the heart of that is leadership. And leadership we used to define in a very hierarchical way about command and control. Leadership's not about that today. In a digital world, leadership is about a different set of C's. So instead of command and control, it's about being the communicator, being the coach, being the catalyst, and being the connector of different ideas and different people. As a leader, it's then about saying, how can you amplify the impact of other people? So it's not about what you do, but it's about what you enable other people to achieve. And then it's recognizing that inside your company and outside your company, with your partners and also with your customers, change is something which nobody feels instantly comfortable with. So we tend to kind of reject newness. And so it's about helping people to kind of see the benefits rather than the problems with that change, and moving through the change curve, the emotional negative through to the emotional positive side. And so that you actually take them through and accelerate them through that kind of like initial kind of uncertainty, to the point where they really do have a shared passion with you about what they're trying to achieve and how you can help them to achieve it. And then the process in terms of structure and logistics and processes, the hard things, is much easier to make happen. Any company, be you Coca-Cola, Red Bull, Procter & Gamble, Microsoft, even Apple, constantly have to rethink what makes them successful and what are the ideas which they can move forward with to keep inspiring their customers and their employees over time. And the best ideas don't come from their competitors, they come from other places. So it's really about crossing boundaries and thinking, how can I learn from other sectors? How can I learn from other companies? And as you see new startups, as you see new business models emerging, think about, well, how could I do that? So take Nespresso coffee, for example, selling the coffee machines very cheaply, and then signing up their customers to a coffee club, by which you then get the regular subscription in terms of the capsules, and 1,000 times more profitable, the capsules, than the coffee machines. So you have this ongoing relationship. Interesting. But what would that mean for selling Red Bull? So how could Red Bull move into that market? So giving them an analogy or a model and then moving to it. Let's think about gaming. So their Gen Y target audience is very much a gaming market. Most games are freemium kind of business models. You get it free and then you pay for things over time. It's about building community. It's about creating addictive gaming, which people want to kind of be part of, and connecting people socially at the same time. So if you can sell Red Bull as a drink, how do you create the freemium socialized community model in order to be successful? And suddenly, by looking at different models and different worlds and then saying, well, how could you learn from that? You spark people to, and all sorts of imaginative ideas come out of them. So I guess one of the things which makes me a bit different is about being able to deliver an inspiring keynote and bring best ideas from all over the world and to make people think in a very different way in a short period of time. But then say, well, okay, how are we going to do something about that? How are we going to apply that to my business? So in the workshops which I develop around either marketing or strategy or innovation or customers or branding, then it's about saying, how can the individuals think about their businesses, think about the issues which they really have, frame the challenge in the right way for them, and then be selective about the right models and say, well, how can I use that model or that process? And then start to apply things and think, where do I start? And then what's the next step? How do I engage my colleagues or my bosses in terms of wanting to make that thing happen? And that might be a half day or 1 day workshop, or then it might actually move through to a short project to really think about, well, how can I start to make this happen as a team? And so it might be a series of interventions where firstly they're about opening up their ideas, so we might call that an insight lab or an insight workshop. The second one would then be about design thinking in terms of saying, how can we connect the best ideas together to create better concepts, better potential solutions? Then evaluating them, and it might come together again. And as a project team, think about, well, okay, we've got lots of the ideas. How are we going to evaluate them? And in quite a rapid but focused and disciplined way, how can we then decide what's the blueprint for the future? And which ones do we make first? And how do we develop a series of horizons by which we can start to make the best ideas happen in a practical and a well-costed and hopefully a profitable way? One comment which comes out more than anything at the end of when I speak is, that was really inspiring. So it's a lot about sort of energy, and it's a lot about kind of stretching people to think in a bit of a different way. But it's also about making sense of a changing world where people kind of see lots of fragments as to what's going on. They see lots of different companies doing different things. And so making sense of the world, I think, is an important thing which I do. There's then something about kind of saying, well, I want to learn something new. So learning about new companies, be they Ashma in terms of textiles, or Alibaba in terms of business to business. Maybe it's Zynga in terms of gaming, or Zedisha in terms of finance. So, companies which they perhaps haven't heard of and could learn something new from, and some new models and some ways of thinking which they could practically apply to their business. So it's that combination of different perspectives, their left and their right brain, being engaged at the same time. So, the passion to want to do something, but also the tools to actually being able to start doing it themselves afterwards. And, at the end of it, with a bit of colour and a bit of fantastic graphics and a bit of kind of participation at the same time, getting people to say, well, yes, I really enjoyed that. That was a fantastic session. But actually, I'm going to go away and I think we can do something about that. And that's what's most satisfying to me.